Greetings. It is time to turn the page. I know people are probably still grieving the 49ers NFC Championship game loss, but we're here to get to the fun stuff of the offseason. We're here to break down the entire 49ers roster where there may be holes. There are a lot of them right now where the business will have to be executed. And we'll be talking about how the 49ers can potentially create another monster at the margins. That's how I describe their 2021 team. They weren't as dominant as 2019, as evidenced by the fact that everything was a white knuckle ride. Remember that Super Bowl run? They blew everybody out, almost everybody during the regular season. Then they blew out both of their opponents in the playoffs, and they finally lost to the Chiefs. Well, this season was probably more exhilarating just because of how heart-stopping it was, but it certainly didn't have the same level of power and cohesion as that 2019 team did. But the 49ers were able to deliver at the margins roster-wise so they could become a cohesive unit and deliver in all those heart-rending moments. So there was a different type of DNA to the 2021 team, and it's the type of DNA that they're going to want to perpetuate moving forward. And they're also going to want to try to make this roster as dominant as possible in 2022 so they don't have a heart attack every single time that they take the field, or at least give their fans a heart attack every single time they take the field. So it's going to be quite the offseason for the 49ers. We've talked about Garoppolo. We've talked about Trey Lance. We talked about the possibilities of some signings, in the distant future. But now we're just going to talk about everything, and we're going to do it within the context of looking at the roster that I have in front of me. That is the Google spreadsheet. If you want to follow along, I'm going to put it in the chat section right now. You can make a copy and edit this however you want, but I think it'll be easier for all of you to just click on that. I'll put it and pin it once this video is finished in the actual comment section. But in the chat section, you can actually take a look at that article, follow along with me. I already see some people coming aboard right now. So we can actually visualize where the 49ers have roster holes and how they must fill them. First, a couple truths entering this offseason. The 49ers currently have only 34 contracted players for 2022. Remember, ultimately, this is going to be a much larger roster than that. It's going to be a 90-man roster over the course of the offseason, and then a 70-man roster over the course of the season, assuming the NFL keeps its same practice squad and roster size rules in 2022. So for now, only 34 of the offseason 90 are under contract. They only count the top 51 for salary cap purposes as far as pay goes. But here's the rudimentary figures. The 49ers have $204 million in current liabilities for 2022. And there's going to be $208 million salary cap for the season. So only about $4 or $5 million in total room as we speak. There are many expenditures looming. They're going to have to probably pay Nick Bosa and Deebo Samuel, and despite the fact that those two are currently under their rookie contracts for 2022, but they're eligible for lucrative extensions. So that's going to cost some money. Yes, there are money-saving opportunities. The biggest one that everybody likes to talk about are potential savings via a Jimmy Garoppolo trade. That would net the 49ers about $25 million. So it would take this $204 million number down to about $175, $180 million. And it would leave the 49ers in a spot where they could pay for more players. But even without Garoppolo, the 49ers will still have only about $33 million to fill the 20 or so spots and pay Bosa and Samuel. So you can see how this is going to be a little bit of a squeeze. And through this lens is how we should view the 49ers roster, which has just popped onto your screen. So go ahead. I know I could see a lot of you. You're all anonymous up there, but I could see that a lot of you have already logged in. Check out the link in the chat section if you're now joining, and you could see this roster big on your screen, and we could go through this position by position to set the table for what might be the most fascinating 49ers offseason of all time. Obviously, it has a high bar to clear because last season's 49ers offseason was the most fascinating, to me at least, of all time. You don't see trades up to number 3 to pick a quarterback while you already have a veteran quarterback that you're going to start the next season on the roster. So that made this whole season so much more contentious than we'd seen even before. And it had been crazy before too, with fans and people arguing Garoppolo, Lance, this and all that. But, for somebody who just loves roster building and roster construction, to me, it was just fascinating to see how the 49ers constructed something that they thought could operate on a dual track. And I think so far they've been successful. They wanted the short-term track in 2021. That involved Garoppolo, and they also wanted to set the table for the long-term track, and that involved Trey Lance. Well, they tried to have their cake and eat it too. It appears that they might have been successful, although we won't know for sure until we see how Trey Lance pans out for the future. So that leads to our first look, and that is the quarterback room. You see up here, they still have Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster. They obviously still have Trey Lance on the roster. Now, keep in mind that this spreadsheet I have updated to assume that pending free agents will be gone. So if you scroll down here, this is the list of pending free agents. Nobody is an official free agent until the new league year starts in March. So all these guys on this list, and there's 38 guys on this list for the 49ers, they're still only pending free agents right now. But for the intents and purposes of this exercise, we have removed them from the depth chart and the roster above, and we've put them in this list. So Nate Sudfeld, for example, he was under a 1-year deal. He is no longer on this depth chart. He's down on that free agent list. So right now, under contract for the 49ers, you have Garoppolo and you have Lance. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are talking as if they haven't made up their minds on Garoppolo. Meanwhile, Garoppolo's talking as if everybody has made up their minds. It was interesting to see the duality in the press conference the other day. I think the reason behind that is clear. The 49ers want to maintain their option power for as long as possible, whereas Garoppolo has to look out for himself. And if there is a chance that he does get traded, if his future isn't, even above 50% certain with the 49ers, it makes sense for him to broadcast potential availability within the trade market. So it's two sides, both trying to act in their best interest. The 49ers want as much value as possible. And if there's even the faintest, slightest chance they hold on to Garoppolo, they can maybe drive up a price. Whereas on the other side, Garoppolo can drive up interest from places that he potentially will be interested in going to if he broadcasts availability. So it's simple business, I think, that illustrates why the messaging seemed different from both Garoppolo and Shanahan and Lynch the other day. The overarching takeaway is that nothing is certain, but Garoppolo is very likely on his way out via trade. Now, we can talk until we're blue in the face about what the 49ers might net in return for Garoppolo in a trade. That won't be determined until a trade actually happens. And the reason why it's so hard to put a finger on is because quarterback value in this league is something that A, changes from a year-to-year basis as far as the trade market goes, and B, varies so much on how individual executives value less tangible assets from a quarterback versus strictly physical assets and physical potential for a quarterback, and how the executives on this year's quarterback market view and balance those two attributes in Garoppolo will determine how much teams offer the 49ers. So, for example, last year, Carson Wentz ended up fetching a first-round pick. It was a conditional first-round pick in the trade from the Eagles to the Colts, but it was still a first-round pick because the conditions ended up being met. Carson Wentz has not been as good of a quarterback as Jimmy Garoppolo. Has been far less efficient, has made far more mistakes with far less positive plays to mask those mistakes. Obviously, it's translated into fewer wins for the teams of which he's been the quarterback. But everybody would agree that Carson Wentz is more physically talented than Jimmy Garoppolo. And it appears to me that the Indianapolis Colts, when trading for Carson Wentz, when committing that conditional first-round pick for him, it appears to me that they highly valued that potential physical talent. Now, did it work out for them? Well, we'll see. This season, I wouldn't say that it worked out for the Colts because they were a playoff team with Phillip Rivers and they weren't with Wentz, and they spent a ton of capital on him. And they also inherited a very pricey contract that the Eagles had signed around the same time that the Rams signed Jared Goff, who was traded away with his pricey contract to the Detroit Lions. So the jury's still out on Carson Wentz, but I think the Colts definitely want more than they got this year because they paid a whole lot for him and he didn't deliver, I think, play that was really above replacement level for Indianapolis. So the question is, if Garoppolo is traded, where does that market lie? A lot of people, pro 49ers people are going to say, well, he's better than Carson Wentz. So, he should also command at least a conditional first-round pick. And to that I say, well, although Garoppolo may have been more efficient than Carson Wentz, so much of these trade markets for quarterbacks is determined by the perception physically of that quarterback. And Carson Wentz is 6'5", 230 pounds. Chris Ballard for the Colts decided to roll the dice on that. He said, I can make this guy great. And hey, there might be executives that see Jimmy Garoppolo and his quick release and his accuracy on those shorter passes as something that they really need to complete a championship contending team. And they might be willing to pay a high premium for that because Garoppolo has demonstrated the ability to lead teams to win, to be efficient. He was top 5 in EPA per play while executing the 49ers system this year. And if that ends up being the case, well, then Jimmy Garoppolo will command a return. I think that the return for Jimmy Garoppolo, if the 49ers do indeed trade him, will not be as high as some very overly optimistic people think it might be. And I don't think it will be as low as some of the really pessimistic people might be. I mean, there are people that think the 49ers will be lucky to get a 5th or a 6th for Jimmy Garoppolo. And that's a joke, right? That's not going to be the case. There will be value. There will be demand for him this year. Is he the perfect trade candidate? No. But the fact that he isn't carrying around a massive contract, the fact that he's carrying around a flexible one-year deal, essentially, because that's all that remains on this 49ers contract, actually is a good thing, because Jared Goff, for example, was untradeable unless the Rams were willing to send a whole hell of a lot to the Lions, right? So they swapped Goff and Stafford, but the Rams ended up sending 2 first-round picks on top of that to the Detroit Lions. And one of those first-round picks might have been for Stafford, but the other one was to say, hey, please take Jared Goff's salary away from us. He's being paid way too much. We made a mistake with this contract. That's why I called it the Goff load, not the offload, the Goff load, right? So there is no need for a Garoppolo offload this year because his deal is much more manageable than someone like Jared Goff's or someone like Carson Wentz's contract. In that case, you think about the deal and you think about teams that might need a quarterback for just a season, either to contend or to contend while building a bridge, or, you could think about a team that needs one for longer and they can structure their own deal with Jimmy Garoppolo much more easily because they'll be in a situation where he only has that 1 year that's flexible left on his contract. So if you need to get under the salary cap as a team, you can trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, and then you can extend him. He's 30 years old right now. Sign him to a 3 or 4 year deal, lower the cap hit in 2022, and be in much better position. So Garoppolo is an asset for the 49ers right now. Shanahan and Lynch maintain that they're not sure what they're going to do. They say that he made the decision, at the very least, difficult for them through his efficient play this year that obviously helped lead the 49ers all the way to the NFC title game. I'm sure the league took notice of some of the toughness that they saw from Jimmy Garoppolo, the ability to play through injuries, which had derailed him in the past. And the 49ers will move from there on an option power basis. This is what they strove to do throughout the entire 2021 calendar year. They wanted to build option power at the quarterback position, and they're going to try to maintain that option power moving forward, even if they do trade Jimmy Garoppolo. Nate Sudfeld's not there anymore, but you see Garoppolo and you see Lance. What do the 49ers do to bolster the position? Well, I think acquiring a cheaper veteran is something that makes a lot of sense. Steve Young said this the other day. The 49ers last year, as they were going through their different quarterback options, initially thought that they might acquire a cheaper veteran to bolster the room with Jimmy Garoppolo. Andy Dalton was a quarterback that the 49ers were extremely interested in last year. The thing about Andy Dalton, though, is that he had played the 2020 season for only $3 million with the Dallas Cowboys. If the 49ers could have found a solid, dependable veteran backup for around $3 to $5 million, that plan would have been much more appealing. The problem is that Dalton priced himself out of that by playing a lot in place of Dak Prescott for Dallas in that 2020 season. And he ended up signing with the Bears for something like $12 or $13 million. And at that price point, the 49ers were like, if the market is starting to move in that direction, they said, well, we'd rather just take the big swing with the rookie. And they really, really liked Trey Lance. So they made the big trade. They went up to number 3, and they decided to keep Garoppolo as their veteran starter, but they would also have the rookie to groom in Lance. So now, assuming that Lance takes the reins, and the 49ers are thrilled that he's turned out to be the person, the character that they thought he was during the pre-draft process, so they think that he might be ready to reign. He does. How do you insulate that position? Dalton is again going to be a free agent. He played his year for the Bears, and obviously Justin Fields is the quarterback there. So do you go in that direction? Do you go in another veteran direction? Do you draft somebody else just to be able to groom 2 guys at once? I highly doubt that. But I think that the best pairing would be Lance, if Garoppolo's not there, obviously. Lance with a veteran who has somehow, someway proven that he could be competent in this league, at least on a meeting room basis. Because Trey Lance benefited so much this season from having Jimmy Garoppolo in that room with him. So if Jimmy is indeed gone, and we've heard the rave reviews about how the 49ers and Garoppolo and Lance were able to handle that situation, you still have to consider the fact that Lance is only 21 years old right now, that the majority of his playing time has come at the FCS level, and that he very much was a work in progress for the 49ers as expected last year. So you still want that veteran sounding board in the room. And I know they're interested in Andy Dalton last offseason before they decided to go the Garoppolo and Lance route. So I'm very curious to see if they're interested in a guy like that again. Again, the price point will have to be right, but there is going to have to be an expenditure, in my opinion, on this quarterback position, even if Garoppolo's salary is cut off the book. So in that case, if you're paying somebody $5 million, that quarterback spot, $6 million, whatever, you're only going to save $19 million net, right, on the quarterback position. You save $25 million through Garoppolo, but then you have to spend on somebody else. So it's going to be a situation where nothing comes for free. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. All right, moving on to the running back room. Let's make this big again so y'all could see this. Make sure that you open up the link, which is at the top of the chat section, so you can take a look at the spreadsheet yourself. If you look at the running back room for the 49ers, there are 3 players left under contract after free agency starts this year. Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon. And then at the fullback position, Kyle Juszczyk. And Juszczyk, I should note, is about to enter his 10th NFL season, which is remarkable. Kyle Juszczyk is as dependable as they come, as steady as they come, as cohesive of a locker room force as they come. And entering year 10, coming out of Harvard, you have to tip your cap to that, because he is continuing to deliver that same consistent play for the 49ers. That's such an incredibly important staple to their offense. So Juszczyk is going nowhere. Over here on the right column, I have the 11 players who the 49ers have already signed to reserve future contracts. They did that earlier this week for the 2022 season. And they decided to keep Josh Hokett, shout out to Fresno State, fullback around. Hokett is still Juszczyk's emergency backup. They like what they see from him. And the position is so important that it's, just vital to maintain a player who can fill in for Juszczyk and be called up from the practice squad when that is needed. And Hokett now will be entering his 3rd season trying to do just that for the 49ers. And, you never know when Juszczyk has been very durable, but you never know when the 49ers will need that, when they'll need Hokett. And I think that's why they're keeping him around, because when Juszczyk, if and when he does go down, and you can knock on wood because you never hope that anybody gets injured, you absolutely need a specialist at a versatile blocking position, because it's so important within the course of Shanahan's scheme. You absolutely need somebody who knows what they're doing to make sure that the offense skips as few beats as possible. Quick reminder here as we talk about the running back position for everybody to subscribe. I know that we're getting more and more viewers on the channel, so hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification button. I'm going to be going so deep into 49ers offseason plans over the course of the next few months. You probably have an idea of it right now. I'm very detail oriented. So if you're just now joining the channel through Twitter or whatever, make sure you hit the subscribe button. It would be much appreciated. And we're going to have the most comprehensive 49ers coverage possible, both on here and on the Athletics. So I want you guys to subscribe to both spots. Running back room. You have Mitchell, you have Sermon. Was Sermon a disappointment this year? Maybe, but it was also only Sermon's first year. And Kyle Juszczyk pointed it out actually in his press conference the other day. He was with Baltimore as a rookie, and he only played on special teams. He got like 4 offensive snaps all season. Trey Sermon got a few more than that. But for Juszczyk, he was playing a different position. He's at fullback. He didn't really become a full-time guy until year 2. So, and we've seen guys have good year ones, like Dante Pettis, for example, right? Before flaming out later down the road. So I wouldn't read too much into Sermon's production or lack thereof just yet. What a player does between year 1 and year 2 is more important than anything they do entering or during year 1. So if Trey Sermon puts together a good offseason now that he's oriented in the NFL and he shows up next year and looks like a different player, which is entirely possible, the 49ers will have one of their running back slots solved. Elijah Mitchell, with him, you could apply the same logic. Elijah Mitchell had a great year 1, but now he needs to make sure he carries it over into year 2. For this reason, the 49ers may want to bring a veteran, and I think they will, to fill out the room. Jeff Wilson is a player who is a free agent, but my big question is, where does Raheem Mostert potentially lie in the 49ers' plans? Because Raheem Mostert, had he delivered an entirely healthy season, running at the clip that we saw in the preseason and in training camp and over his first 2 carries against the Lions in the season opener, which I think netted like 20 or 21 yards. He looked really explosive. If Mostert had stayed healthy, I think he would definitely have priced himself out of the 49ers' plans. And in a way, Elijah Mitchell is the successor and the replacement for Raheem Mostert. But as we know, you can never have enough good running backs, especially in Kyle Shanahan's system. And the fact that Mostert had knee surgery and was out for all of this season after week 1 means that he probably will be able to be had at a bit of a discount. So does Raheem reach 100% again? That's his goal after the surgery. And does Raheem re-sign with the 49ers? I think some people will balk at that idea because of how often he has gotten hurt. But you cannot discount how Raheem Mostert has really just glided through openings, through the outside zone in this Kyle Shanahan system. And if you have workhorses in Elijah Mitchell potentially, and maybe even in Trey Sermon getting a few more carries, or maybe even in Jeff Wilson, if the 49ers re-sign him, if you have players like that, Raheem Mostert's role doesn't have to be that of a featured back. And if it's not that of a featured back, maybe he has a better chance of staying healthy. It's at least worth consideration to see if the 49ers can fit that into their salary cap plans. As far as the third running back and who fills that role coming out of the backfield, I don't know. That will all work itself out. But JaMychal Hasty is also going to be a free agent this offseason, and he was in that role against the Rams. On to receiver. Let's take a look. Receiver position. Only 3 guys under contract, as you can see here, when free agency takes hold. You have your headliners. You have Samuel. You have Brandon Ayuk. By the way, shout out to Deebo Samuel. I just ran the numbers this morning. He, including the postseason, ended up with over 1,500 receiving yards and over 500 rushing yards. It took the Rams NFC Championship game for him to surpass the milestone in both categories. But what we just saw from Deebo Samuel was one of the greatest seasons in NFL history. He became the first player to rack up over 1,500 receiving yards and 500 rushing yards in the same year. So the 1,500, 500 club, Deebo Samuel is the only member of it. When we talk about Deebo, we have to talk about his potential contract because he's eligible for one, and the 49ers, John Lynch, said that they budgeted for it. And perhaps by budgeting for it, he means they plan to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. Still be some room for Samuel. I can only give you a rough ballpark estimate for Deebo Samuel's cap hit under a new contract, and the 49ers can obviously backload it because the salary cap is expected to explode in 2023, so they have to bridge the gap to that year. But with the game's best receivers making nearly $20 million a year, and with Deebo Samuel having made NFL history this season, we can expect an annual average value of roughly, this is ballpark, $20 million. That means that the 49ers might be able to lower that first-year cap hit to something like $10 or $12 million if they backloaded, but they still have to dedicate a sizable portion of money to it. So you have Samuel, you have Brandon Ayuk, who's still under his rookie deal, who's going to be eligible for an extension next year, especially if he balls out this season. And you have Jawan Jennings. I mean, that's a nice start, but they're going to have to fill out that receiver room. So toughness is a prerequisite at the depth spots of the receiver room. They liked Mohamed Sanu because he could block, right? Because he had demonstrated the toughness to succeed in that room for the 49ers. But Mohamed Sanu is obviously on the tail end of his career. I don't know if the 49ers think they could get more value out of potential fourth and fifth wide receivers moving forward. And to be honest, that's what they need at the receiver room. Don't expect them to make a big splash to fill out the spreadsheet on this roster. As you can see, the frontliners are there. It's depth 1 and depth 2 that are going to need filling out. And they typically carry 6 wide receivers, and they probably are going to need a special teams guy on there. They were happy with Trent Sherfield's, gunner capabilities on special teams this year, and he was a fourth wide out for this team. So maybe they can get Trent Sherfield back for a decent price to start filling out these depth roles on the salary cap. I'm obviously also talking about tight ends as we talk about the receivers, and it looks like tight ends coach John Embry won't be back next year. Don't really have details on the reasons as to why there, but the 49ers are going to have to find a new tight ends coach to work with George Kittle and to work with Charlie Werner and to work with whoever else they bring into that room. It's interesting to me that, as part of the reserve future contracts, the 49ers brought in or kept Tanner Hudson and kept the veteran, the former receiver, Jordan Matthews, around with deals this week. Do either of those two guys work their way onto the active roster instead of someone like Ross Dwelly? Maybe. We'll see as this offseason progresses. And you can extend that to the receiver room. Austin Mack, Keyshawn Johnson, also out of Fresno State, and Connor Weddington out of Stanford. Those guys were on the practice squad to end the season, and those guys have been extended to be part of the 49ers offseason roster this year. We'll see if any of those three can crack the depth portion of the 49ers wideout room. If they do, the 49ers will certainly save some money. So it's always good to develop in-house, and that's why I have those guys highlighted in yellow. So the tight end room is going to be interesting. George Kittle obviously is a star. Charlie Werner made big strides this year, supplanting Ross Dwelly on the 49ers tight end depth chart. And what the 49ers do moving forward, whether or not they bring in a veteran at one of those tight end positions, is all up in the air. That's something that they're determining as we move forward throughout this offseason. All right, now we are moving forward to one of the most critical areas of improvement for the 49ers. Major upgrades are needed both along the front line of the offensive line and at its depth portions, because this was one of the areas where the 49ers got whipped against the Rams in the NFC Championship game. And it was one of the areas where it wasn't really too big of an outlier that they got beaten badly at, because the offensive line for this team did struggle down the stretch in pass protection multiple times, including throughout the final 2 rounds that the 49ers saw in the postseason. So I'm going to highlight the offensive line right here. And you could see that along the starting 5, the 49ers have their work cut out for them. Trent Williams, he may or may not need surgery after playing on a high ankle sprain. And by the way, the 49ers are still probably really regretful that Trent Williams suffered that high ankle sprain, because this is a guy that hardly gave up a pressure a game when he was healthy. Well, Trent Williams gave up 5 pressures against the Rams in the NFC title. And can't convince me that a healthy Trent Williams wouldn't have impacted the outcome of a close game. He wasn't himself. And, he's probably only barely better, if that, than Colton McKivitz would have been. McKivitz gave up 4 pressures, by the way, in Week 18 when he started in place of Trent Williams. So given that information, the 49ers really need Trent Williams to come back healthy next season. He did deliver a historically good year when he wasn't hurt. And that solves a lot of problems for the 49ers up front. Unfortunately for them, he was hurt in the NFC Championship game. Laken Tomlinson is a pending free agent, so I don't have him at that guard spot right there. That's empty. Daniel Brunskill is a pending restricted free agent, so I don't have him at that right guard spot. Alex Mack has 2 more years left on his deal, but Alex, who delivered for the 49ers at that very important center position this year, is 36 years old. And he said that he's not sure if he's going to come back yet next year, ever since his 10th season in the league. And he's way past that at this point. Alex Mack has said that he reevaluates his future every single offseason. So there's a chance that the 49ers won't have Alex Mack anymore, even though he's still technically on the roster. And of course, Mike McGlinchey is working back from a quad tear. So, his recovery is no 100% guarantee because no recovery is. And that's a question at the right tackle position. Tom Compton is a free agent for the 49ers when that starts this year. And they have Aaron Banks, Jalen Moore, and Justin School, who tore his ACL last offseason and didn't play this season, as depth. So as you can see, the cupboard in the offensive line room is relatively bare. Where do the 49ers start? Well, to me, it seems that they probably start by trying to re-sign Laken Tomlinson. Laken hasn't been great in pass protection throughout his time with the 49ers ever since they traded for him back in that 2017 season. But he's been solid, especially lately. He's been the least of their problems at the guard positions. Let's put that way. Daniel Brunskill really struggled in pass protection this year, but Laken Tomlinson was slightly above average. And yeah, Aaron Donald's going to beat everybody from time to time. So Laken has been a rock, especially from a stability perspective. He hasn't missed any time for the 49ers. He's, the only snaps he's missed over the 5 years with them have been when his shoe untied, when he had an equipment failure a couple seasons ago. So you have to hand it to Laken Tomlinson, and you have to realize that durability is going to cost something because he is not going to be the cheapest guard on the market this year. What will he go for? Can the 49ers get him for, I don't know, $6 million, $7 million a year? I don't know, but it's not going to be cheap, right? It's not going to be cheap, especially for a team up against the salary cap. I do think it is important that they bring back Tomlinson. Then they have to decide, do they want to try to make an upgrade through a veteran right guard, or is their second rounder, Aaron Banks, is he finally going to be ready to step up? I think that was one of the big disappointments of this 2021 season. You use a second-round pick on Aaron Banks in a win-now year, in a year where you're signing a bunch of guys to one-year deals, where you're bending over backwards to fit Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster so you can go on a run. And Aaron Banks was the highest draft pick outside of Trey Lance, and he wasn't able to contribute. He didn't see the field outside of the end of the game against Jacksonville during garbage time. So, yes, I am patient. I am sensitive to the fact that there's a big jump between the college game and the pro game, that Aaron Banks had to work on his body to be able to be ready for that jump. But I could still simultaneously say that it's disappointing from the 49ers perspective that Banks wasn't ready to take over the 49ers' weakest position on the offensive line, and that was right guard, where I think a natural tackle, a former college tight end, and Daniel Brunskill was trying to handle the load. So will Banks be ready? Well, the 49ers certainly better hope he's ready. Otherwise, maybe they just bring in Daniel Brunskill as a restricted free agent as a stopgap. I think they like Brunskill no matter what. And as a restricted free agent, Daniel Brunskill would be too economical and too logical to bring back, to not bring back. You have to bring Daniel Brunskill back because, as we saw in 2019, he's a utility piece. He could play both tackle spots. He could play both guard spots. He could even play center. So he could play all 5 offensive line spots. I think as a restricted free agent who you tender, a second-round tender or even the lowest level tender, Brunskill's a guy you have to bring back, but you want to upgrade at the starting spot of that right guard row. And Aaron Banks is the guy that you drafted to do that. And you also have the left guard spot to take care of. So I don't think that you could, really kill 2 birds there with veterans in free agency. You just won't have enough salary cap space. That's why Banks is such a big piece. And hey, maybe they envision Jalen Moore as more of a guard than a tackle after Moore fell out of favor at the tackle position this year. All right, let's switch it over to the defensive side. I had one more title right here. We'll put this one up as I take a drink. Where is Aaron Banks? As we switch to the defensive side of the ball, everybody remember that even without Garoppolo, the 49ers will have only $33 million to fill 20 spots and pay both Nick Bosa and Deebo Samuel. That's the overarching truth behind this offseason. The other overarching truth is that you should subscribe if you're just now joining the show, because the channel has grown from 5,000 to 10,000 in like 2 weeks. So I want to see it go from 10K to 20K in like 8 weeks. That would be really cool. So subscribe right now. We got a lot of in-depth stuff to get to throughout this offseason. On to the defense, the D-line. Chris Kasarik, defensive line coach. Can he continue playing defensive line money ball as impressively as he has? Because, I mean, we saw just a remarkable achievement from the defensive line this year. 49ers got a bunch of new guys. They surrounded their star player, Nick Bosa, with those new guys. And obviously, I shouldn't discount Eric Armstead, who, in my opinion, is also a star. So they surround Bosa and Armstead with a bunch of misfit toys, misfit pieces, and they make it work. And they make it work, I mean, to absolute beauty. Even in the loss in the NFC Championship game on Sunday, the 49ers hit Matthew Stafford 9 times. They shut down the Rams' run game in the second half when push came to shove. LA had -3 yards rushing when everything was on the line. So, yes, the 49ers defensive line might not have been perfect this season, but they were really good after week 8, after Armstead moved inside to take over for Javon Kinlaw and pair with DJ Jones at tackle. They were the number 1 run defense in football. They were probably the number 2 or number 3 pass rush in football from week 14 onward, after this gaggle of players that was highlighted by Sansom Ebukam got going. So as we look at where the 49ers are roster-wise, we see that they're going to have to replenish some of the depth that was very successful on a team-wide, unit-wide basis from week 14 onward, where they really started firing outside of Bosa, where guys like Jordan Willis, Ebukam himself, Arden Key, all those guys came together to deliver for the 49ers. Bosa's obviously going to command big money. How much? Over $20 million per year. That's what his brother got. That's what Nick deserves. Nick might be the best defensive player in football. He should have been an all-pro this year. He got snubbed. He's amazing, and he's going to get paid. He deserves that money this offseason. So when you look at Bosa, you have to think about the 49ers' financial realities, and you have to think about how much more will they be willing to afford in the defensive line. And a look at the past history of this 49ers regime tells us they're going to be willing to invest a lot in this defensive line. As dominance up front goes, so goes the 49ers defense. This team is rush over coverage. And as we, analyze every single thing that John Lynch has ever said about the unit up front, about his defense up front, and everything the 49ers have done, we know that they will not be willing to spend here. They're already paying Eric Armstead big money. They already have Sansom Ebukam under contract, and they've already invested big time first-round picks in both Bosa and Javon Kinlaw. And Kinlaw is the big name for me. This is the big determinant for me. Is DJ Jones going to come back? Because DJ Jones, the 49ers' big nose tackle, just had an excellent year, by far the best of his career. Jones would have to slot into this spot right here. Javon Kinlaw might currently be taking it up. But Kinlaw is coming off of ACL injury, and he's had chronic knee issues throughout the course of his career. So I would really caution the 49ers against putting all their eggs in the Kinlaw basket. Because if you put them all there, then you might do so at the expense of keeping DJ Jones. And if you don't keep DJ Jones and Javon Kinlaw gets hurt again, if that knee continues bothering him, well, then you've completely lost the interior duo of Armstead and Jones. That was the best run-stopping duo in all of football and really transformed the 49ers defense. So the big question right now is, can the 49ers bank on Javon Kinlaw? They certainly want to, because they traded away DeForest Buckner. They got a first-round pick in return, and they ultimately used, after another trade, that pick on Kinlaw. He has prodigious size. His calves look like pillars of granite. He's a player who absolutely can be transformative for the 49ers in this scheme if he's healthy. The availability has been the issue. And I like DJ Jones as either a one technique if the 49ers ever need that, or in that 2-eye spot in the middle of the defense. I like him next to Eric Armstead. The 49ers and the metrics and everything absolutely love that this year as that number 1 run defense. The question is, how much is DJ Jones going to cost? I mean, he's a Brandon Mebane type, right? Remember Mebane on the inside of that Seattle defensive line and the Legion of Boom defenses. I mean, he was a hell of a player. He was a hell of a force. He was tough to block. He could rush the passer, and he could also clog against the run. But those guys are important to defenses everywhere right now. And I think DJ is going to be able to make some money. Remember, the 49ers got DJ at a discount this past season, $3 million or so. That was an impressive price that they got for DJ Jones. But it was a prove it kind of year. It was a prove it deal, and he proved himself. And when you prove yourself, you're going to make coin next year. So DJ deserves all the money that he has coming to him. And I'm not sure if the 49ers will be able to afford him. But I would advise that they should probably, if there is a chance they can afford him, they should make him a priority, just because I wouldn't bank on Javon Kinlaw. One guy who definitely earned the second year of his contract down the stretch was Samson Ebukam. Ebukam didn't start this season all too well. In fact, his pass rusher productivity rating was really low up until around that week 14 time. And then he surged. And now the 49ers have Ebukam at a bargain. They had him at 2 years, $12 million, $6 million per year. What the type of edge rushing that Samson Ebukam is doing, and I think that the 49ers are happy to pay that cost. I talk about Moneyball on the defensive line because the 49ers were able to fit some of these misfit toys. You know, guys like Arden Key, who was a cast-off from the Raiders. Guys like Jordan Willis, who they acquired for a sixth-round pick swap with the New York Jets in 2020. Guys like Charles Omenihu, who will remain under contract, who cost what? That was a seventh-round pick swap for Willis, and it was a sixth-round pick that they traded for Omenihu for the Texans. They were able to make the defensive line work with all of these various pieces who other teams didn't necessarily put a priority on keeping. Chris Kasarik is excellent at getting this job done. The question is, can the 49ers continue doing that? Can they re-sign a guy like Jordan Willis, who they obviously really liked, who delivered the block in the game against Green Bay for them, who obviously fits into this locker room from a personality perspective? Can they build another unit full of guys like him, like Kerry Hyder Jr., who they had in 2020? Can they build another unit that Chris Kasarik can mold into an effective one, playing the type of money ball that we have discussed? That's the big question moving forward for the 49ers. And I think so far they have demonstrated both the financial and the draft capital willingness to do so. And they've also demonstrated that Chris Kasarik is very, very capable of coaching the group up into that level. Omenihu is going to be interesting to me because when the 49ers traded that sixth rounder to him with Houston, when they traded that sixth rounder for him with Houston, not to him, Omenihu didn't get a sixth round pick. The Texans did. When the 49ers did that, they knew that he had another year left on his deal. They knew that they were going to be losing some defensive linemen to free agency potentially. So they knew that Omenihu would have a chance to develop, which he did this year, and would have a chance to really make a splash in 2022. Now, one guy who, might save some money is this guy. You can still see him on the roster right there, and that is Dee Ford. Dee Ford saw his 2021 cut short, and fans automatically thought that he'd be done for sure. He may or may not be done for sure. I don't know. The thing is that the Dee Ford experience is one that is going to be very, very unpredictable with his back injury for the rest of his career. And he restructured his deal with the 49ers after the 2020 season, heading into this 2021 season. And to the shock of many, he was actually able to come in and play some productive football. But the problem is he just didn't stay healthy enough over that course of time. Well, the 49ers, because of that restructure, still have a couple options with Ford. And I wrote them down in this piece, and I detailed them in this breakdown. He had an $11.6 million injury guarantee entering the 2021 season before the 49ers restructured his deal. And the team was able to spread the guarantee out over 2 years between a $7 million guarantee in 2021 and a $4.6 million guarantee this season. So Ford currently isn't healthy. It's the same drill that we dealt with about 365 days ago. However, 4.6 million of that original 11.6 million guarantee is still on the table. That means that it won't be all too financially incentivized to cut Ford right now. The most money the 49ers can save if they do cut Ford this offseason with a post-June 1st designation is $2.4 million. So, yes, this time around, the 49ers can actually save some money by cutting Dee Ford, $2.4 million to be exact. But that being said, if there is a chance that he does come back and deliver a few productive games, it might be worth it for the 49ers to just hold on to him and see if they can get something out of the house money. Last year, they did get something out of the Ford over the first few games. Was it worth $2.4 million? You can be the judge. Maybe not. Maybe yes. Maybe you get something more this year. Maybe they get nothing. It's an unpredictable injury. And maybe Kyle Shanahan's just sick of it and he wants to cut ties with Ford. And that's what he'll do. And he'll save the $2.4 million. It's certainly more appealing to cut Ford now than it was last year, where it would have been more expensive to jettison Ford than it would have been to keep him. This year, with a post-June 1st designation, the 49ers can get rid of him, and they could at least gain some money through that, but it's not as much as some people expect. So the big question for the defensive line room is ultimately going to be not with guys like D Ford, it's going to be with the guys at the margins. Can the 49ers bring back a player like Jordan Willis? Can they bring back, a player like Arden Key, who's going to be way more expensive, I think, and is going to be an unrestricted free agent this year? Can those players, who will both be unrestricted free agents, come back? And if they don't, can Chris Kasarik find other pieces to help fill the void and develop the defensive line unit into another cohesively dominant pass rush that we eventually saw in 2021? On to the linebacker room. Now, this is the strongest position on the team, even though you can see right here, there are only two guys currently under contract: Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. Azeez Al-Shire, well, maybe the 49ers are able to get him back. You could find him right here. He's a restricted free agent on the list, and that means that the 49ers should be able to tender Al-Shire, and I think that's for a reasonable cost, and I think that's absolutely going to be a priority for this football team, because in the case of the linebackers, this is the unit that reminded me most of Tampa Bay and that fearsome linebacker trio that they had on their way to last season's Super Bowl championship. When the 49ers got fully healthy on this second level by the end of the season, when they had Warner, when they had Greenlaw, when they had Al-Shire, they were running, they were hitting, they could cover. The versatility of the defense was really unlocked and really on display, especially against the Packers, with a healthy linebacking unit. So I think that between Warner, Greenlaw, and Azeez Al-Shire, who's a restricted free agent who you can keep around for a decent cost, I think with those guys, I think the 49ers are essentially set. You pick up a bargain bin free agent to be your fourth or your fifth linebacker. Make sure you can play special teams, but on the front line, the 49ers have to like where they're at this second level. They also, if you look at the tendered guys, they brought back Stanford product Curtis Robinson to a future contract. And speaking of the future contracts, they like Slayton and they like Chris Slayton and Alex Barrett, who's an edge rusher. They brought both of those guys back to what might be the practice squad, but will be an offseason chance to work with the team in the defensive line room. And any chance to work with Chris Kasarik is a promising one. All right. We're going to finish up with a secondary. These guys are at a fascinating crossroads. If you're on right now, subscribe. I need to give my voice a little bit of a break. Cranking out a lot of good stuff. Subscribe to the channel. It's growing fast. Okay, secondary. At the crossroads right now. We're going to make this big because this, to me, is something that I'm just not sure what direction the 49ers will go in. Obviously, entering this 2021 season, they having a star experienced veteran was necessary. That was Jason Verrett. Verrett tore his ACL in the season opener against Detroit. The 49ers ended up being able to manage to make it all the way to the NFC Championship game without him. But I think that Jason Verrett probably would have helped them had he been healthy, make it a little bit further, because the margin was really narrow. Ambry Thomas had a rough go of it in that NFC title game. I don't want to bring back bad memories, but there was a 97-yard drive there for the Los Angeles Rams that was prolonged on its first down by a pass interference call from Ambry Thomas against Van Jefferson. That being said, Ambry has surged over the course of the past few months. That was one of the biggest developments of the season, right? That helped the 49ers make the playoffs in the first place. The guy was unplayable as a rookie at the start of the season, and he was excellent, and he sealed the 49ers playoff berth at the end of it. As of right now, I think Ambry Thomas and Emmanuel Mosley project as the 49ers starting cornerbacks. But considering the fact that they invested in Jason Verrett last year, it makes me wonder, does this team want to bring in a veteran or somebody that could threaten for a starting spot in this next season? Do they think they can get better at the cornerback position? Well, even if they don't think they can get better at outside cornerback, you could see the big blank here at nickel cornerback. I think K'Wan Williams, who turned 30 this year, started to suffer a bit of a decline. He was one of the best slot corners in the league for a while there, but again, he turned 30 this year. He was out for considerable periods of time with injury, and it's going to take a lot to answer Cooper Kupp in the NFC West lining up out of the slot. So do they bring K'Wan back for another one-year deal, or do they go for fresher blood there? Do they go for more star power at the nickelback spot? I don't know, but it's going to be fascinating to see what the 49ers do at such a crucial position. Then you have the case of Jaquiski Tartt, who they brought in on a one-year deal, but is also a pending free agent at strong safety. We know how much this team loves Jimmy Ward. We also know that they love the communication that Tartt has brought to defense. If that communication is, in fact, so important to the 49ers, I wouldn't be surprised to see them re-sign him again because it's that important for them on the secondary. Talanoa Hufanga is a player who impressed them this year. Do I think that he's ready for a bigger role? Maybe, but I'm just not sure. So we're going to see what the 49ers do in this secondary because they have so many decisions at both starting levels and in reserve levels to see how this works. I definitely think they hit it again in the draft because you may be able to find this year's Ambry Thomas in the draft, and that is a guy who can develop and progress over the course of the season. So it's important that the 49ers keep their foot on the gas in the secondary, but it's also important that we keep the big picture in mind. And that is that even without Jimmy Garoppolo, who the 49ers will likely trade, they'll still only have $33 million to fill 20 spots and go through this whole roster that I just went through over the past 51 minutes. They only have 34 contracted players for 2022, and there are a lot of cap liabilities, and there's not a whole lot of space. So with those major expenditures for Deebo Samuel and Nick Bosa looming, the 49ers are in a position right now in which they're going to have to be very financially careful. They're going to have to be very crafty. They're going to have to do some good scouting. They're going to have to win at the margins this offseason. And I hope that set the table well for what's going to be a really busy, busy time. All right, guys, I'm going to have a separate Q&A. That's what I always do, especially in big, big shows like this, because I've already talked for nearly an hour. So subscribe to the channel. Keep your eyes out for the Q&A. I'm going to go eat some food. Going to go say hi to some friends, and I have a huge 49ers article looking back at the drama of this 2021 season dropping on Friday morning on The Athletic. So be sure to check out that piece. Be sure to support both the channel and The Athletic, and we'll even see what my most recent piece was. While I have your attention right now, maybe we can go check out. Oh, yeah, it was the piece on Jimmy Garoppolo. That one was fun. So go ahead and be sure to read that one as we close the books on the 2021 season and we move forward to 2022. Everybody enjoy. Hope you enjoyed it. Check out the chat section for the link to that piece. Check out the comment section for more links. I'll talk to you all soon, and I hope that you enjoyed the show. Take care, everybody.